All right, today is March the 3rd, 2021, and we're here with Jason Tillery, who is running for City Council Place 1. Jason, welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Why don't you tell the voters who you are?
All right. Well, I moved to Amarillo in July of 2019 after serving in the Navy for 20 years. I was born and raised in Fort Worth, but from 2009 to 2012, I was stationed here in Amarillo at the Federal Building on Fillmore Street in downtown. I was what they call an enlisted classifier, so I wrote contracts for men and women who wanted to join the Navy. Several of those young sailors that I put in, I ended up serving with later in my career. 2012, I had to move back to a ship in California to deploy. And then my last 3 years, I served in El Paso at Fort Bliss. But I drove up to Amarillo every other weekend for 3 years to see my kids who were living here with my ex-wife. And I promised my kids I would retire when I hit my 20-year mark and move back home, and moved back here to Amarillo. And along the way, got remarried. My wife and my stepkids, we moved up here, and we've been loving it ever since.
Very good. How long ago was that?
We got married 2 weeks before I retired. So about a year and a half ago, moved here, set up shop, started working again, new career, and just looking for ways to serve. I figured I spent 20 years serving our country in the Navy, which I loved. Absolutely loved it. Some days were harder than others, but I loved it. But I decided that I wanted to do more than just that. I didn't want the Navy to be the only thing I hang my hat on. So I decided to run for city council. So after a couple months of praying and really discussing it with my family, they're on board, and we just know this is the right thing to do.
Very good. So what are the primary issues you think is facing the city council? And what do you propose to resolve them?
Well, first off is transparency. Right now, our city council meets every other week on a Tuesday, middle of the day. Now, I've looked at some of the demographics for Amarillo. The average age is around 35, 36 years old. Most 35 and 36-year-olds in Amarillo in a middle of the day on a Tuesday are working. So they don't have a chance to go to the town hall meetings. They don't have a chance to hear what's being said at city council meetings. They don't have a chance to really understand where their tax dollars are going. So if elected, I'd like to propose that we change the meetings to be in the evenings at City Hall so people can come in, or at least have some sort of live stream service where people could phone in or IM instant message in a question or response. And then on alternating weeks, when we're not at City Hall, take the city council meetings to the people. We have tremendous amount of churches and different civic areas in this town where we could reach the north side of the city, the barrio, reach the south side, the east side, the west side, and really touch the people. Because if you're going to be a public servant, you have to be out there with the public. That's the only way that their voice is going to be heard. And I think that all comes down to transparency. That gives the voter a chance to know what's going on, who their city council members are, who their mayor is. Because I'll be honest with you right now, if I was walking down 10th Street downtown or walking by Westgate Mall over where I live, and I walked by Elaine Hayes or Mayor Nelson, I probably wouldn't be able to tell you who they are from anybody else, because I just don't think they're out in the public enough. Second, I'd like to work on keeping taxes low. I'm not going to do what George H.W. Bush did in 1988, where he said, read my lips, no new taxes. There may be a time where that has to happen, but I think that should be a last resort and only at the public's discretion and at the voters' discretion, so they know where their tax dollars are going. And they should have a say in whether or not we raise taxes. So I'd like to work on keeping taxes low, work on improving our parks and recreations, adding in more bike trails, more hiking trails, more sidewalks. The more people that we can get out of the house, especially coming out of this pandemic. We've had a lot of people isolated, a lot of people stuck inside. Let's put more money into our parks and recreations area so families can get outside. Let's build coverings on top of our playground equipment like John Stiff. It's a great park. But my kids don't like going there in the summertime when it's over 100 degrees and the slides and all the equipment are blazing hot. So let's build a couple of structures that cover that so that way the kids can play. Let's build some walking trails out there, build some more basketball courts. So that way people can get outside, grill out, enjoy the outside, enjoy our parks, build more sidewalks in neighborhoods so people who, maybe older people who don't want to go to a park, can still walk around their neighborhood without having to walk in the street. Of course, work on economic development. You know, I've heard that we have Amazon coming, and that's great. We should be working on attracting and marketing for newer businesses, but we should also work to incentivize our small business owners in this town. If we can give a tax abatement to Amazon, I think we can give a tax abatement to a mom and pop group that wants to start their own business. You know, work maybe free lease for a year at a location or something that incentivizes that entrepreneurial spirit. So those are kind of the things that I really would like to work on. And I know I may not be able to achieve it all, but I think if we work together, either with the incumbents if they're reelected or with candidates that are elected for the first time, I think if we put our best talented people up there in the city council, we can get it done.
So what do you see the role as a city council member? What is, in the scheme of things, what does their position entail?
I think they're there to be an advocate for the people. You know, I mean, I'm not doing this for the $10 per meeting per diem I'm going to get. You know, I could do other things with my time, but I want to serve. I want to be there to fight those fights that need fighting and to be a voice for the people of Amarillo, because I think we have a special town. And I think that there are certain people in this city who feel underrepresented. And I hear about it on social media, whether it's Nextdoor or Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. There seems to be a lot of angst where citizens in our city don't feel like the current city council is representing them well. I would like to take their desires, their needs, their concerns, and make them known and work to achieving those goals.
Well, very good. So you think the most important thing facing the city is transparency?
I think so.
Well, there's a lot of issues. One of them that comes up that I hear about is people want to change the city elections from May to put them in the November election with presidential years and have single member districts. Do you have a position on that?
I do. I completely agree with changing the elections from May to November. And if you want to keep it a 2-year term, so it would be on the midterm and the presidential cycle, I think that when a voter goes in, and I worked the polls for Randall County in this past 2020 election, and I actually live in Randall County, and I was a deputy voter registrar, so I helped people register to vote. My wife and I worked the polls on election day, and we saw so many people coming in. Now, a lot of them were coming in because it was a presidential election. They didn't, I had a few people ask me about the Senate candidates and our congressman candidate, Ronnie Jackson. Of course, I was a poll worker, so I wasn't authorized to really, coax them or tell them who to vote for. You just tell them who they are. But I think if you had your mayor and city council elections on the same day, it would spark something in someone's mind that, oh yeah, we do have elected officials in the city. But I think having it in an off year, an odd year, on a Saturday in May, I think a lot of people forget about it. It gets lost in the shuffle because what else comes up in May? You've got kids going to prom. You've got parents planning family vacations for the summer. You've got graduations coming up. You got Mother's Day weekend, the weekend right after that. You got all these other things that are distracting people, so people aren't really engaged in the electoral process. But they would be if it's in an even number year in November. And as far as single member districts go, right now, we have this multi-member thing where you could be in any part of the city and run for any place, and that's fine. But Amarillo's growing. And as Amarillo continues to grow, we continue to get more diverse. So I think that with single member districts, you get representation from the various parts of the community that may feel like they don't have any representation there right now at all. Mm-hmm. because the north side is different than the colonies. It's different than Windsor or the east side or all these other areas of town. I mean, I've lived all over the world, been stationed all over the United States, and I will tell you that Amarillo is just as diverse as any other major city. We've got areas of the city that, unless you have a reason to go there, most people aren't going to go. And that's true of any neighborhood in this town. So if we had single-member districts, I think we could get better representation for those areas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, now it's somewhat difficult for a lot of people to run because they feel like they don't have the wherewithal to get their message out because they don't have the money, you know. So, and that's kind of what we're trying to do with this, is to get this out to the voters through our party as a service to the community, so the voters can know who the candidates are and help them make a good decision on who to vote for.
Well, and I completely agree with that. And I'm glad that y'all are doing this, because an educated voter makes wise decisions.
Yes.
You know, and like you said, I consider the cost. I'm not wealthy. You know, my wife and I, we are, like I said, but between the two of us, I said we're a blended family. Between the two of us, we have 7 kids. 7 kids cost a lot of money, and they range from 9 to 16 years old. So we have 2 of them that we just had to get cars for in the last couple of years. And we've got insurance payments. We've got debts just like everybody else. So was I a little concerned about that? Yes, I was. But I just feel this is the right thing to do. So we budgeted, you know, a specific amount to set aside for this campaign.
Very good. Are you familiar with, well, I call it the rain tax. I think they affectionately call it their drainage fee. Are you familiar with that?
No, sir, I am not.
Well, they're sending everybody a bill now, a separate bill for drainage on your property, if you own a house or commercial building. Or
yes, actually, I did hear about that recently.
Yeah. Well, I call it the rain tax, and they get mad at me. But to me, if it's drainage, that means where does it come from?
Right.
The sky. Well, I talked to one of the council members about it, and I said, what's this about you guaranteeing me rain? And he didn't understand what I was saying. But I said, well, if you can guarantee me 2 inches a month, maybe an inch every 2 weeks, you know, I'm all for it. But I was being a little facetious, but
right.
Anyway, he says, oh no, that's for drainage from your sprinkler system. It's not rain. I said, okay, well, where does the water come from the sprinkler systems? And all my properties don't have sprinklers.
Right.
He goes, oh, it comes from the city. So the city's causing the problem. No. Anyway, this goes on. And I said, where does the water come from through the sprinkler system? Where does the city get their water? Well, we get it from Lake Meredith. Where does the water come from Lake Meredith? So to me, it's an illegal tax. And I think that's something that's going to come up because I hear a lot of tremendous blowback from the voters about they're not happy about that. And I think it comes back to your transparency issue. They don't appear to be transparent. They say it's a fee, but it's really a property tax.
You can call a Corvette by any other name as a Chevrolet. Mm-hmm. It just rolls off the tongue a little bit sweeter when you say Corvette.
That's right.
A fee by any other name is just a tax.
That's right.
You can dress it up any way you want, but a pig is a pig. You can put a prom dress on it, but it's still a pig. Mm-hmm. And it really grinds my gears when elected officials say, oh, it's not a tax, it's a fee. A fee to use water that I'm already paying to use anyway, and now I got to pay another fee on it for drainage? That doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. And then they're building houses in Palaya Lakes whining about drainage.
Right.
That doesn't make sense to me.
That we had a bad rainstorm that lasted about a week in September, October of 2019. And my wife and I were working with a lady who owns a horse farm out south on Sonsi. Mm-hmm. There were 2 huge playa lakes that 6 months after the rains left, those lakes were still there. Now, they receded, but it took 6 or 7 months for them to recede. And I remember telling her I would never want to own a house in this neighborhood. And they're developing in that neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I said, I lived here for 3 years, 12 years ago. When I first moved out here in 2009, anything south of the loop between there and Canyon, there wasn't a whole lot there. There were a few small farms and ranches. Now there's subdivisions popping up all over the place. And I would not want to live in one of those areas because you're going to have to get some major flood insurance unless they do something major with the drainage around here.
Well, when I asked them about that, they said, "Oh, well, we put in pumps." I'm like, "What happens when you have a 7-inch rain in 30 minutes?"
Right.
Your power is going to be out. Your pumps are not going to work. Not only that, I don't think the pumps are going to be able to keep up with it.
No.
And they've added load to the area. So there's no pasture to soak up the water that there used to be.
Right.
So to me, some of these things that they're doing doesn't make any sense.
No. It's just putting the cart before the horse, I think. I
Yeah.
have no problem with development. Progress is generally a good thing. Having more families and more people come in, start businesses, and move into our city is a good thing. But you have to do it wisely. And you can't just be throwing up neighborhoods where there's no drainage and where there's no runoff. Because, like I said, those playa lakes, and you said
They're there for a reason.
Right. And you said it. They put in pumps, but that's not going to be able to keep up with the demand if we have, and it doesn't happen often, but if we have one of those times where we have 2 or 3 days of straight thunderstorm, heavy rains, pumps are not going to keep up with that.
No, and I've seen it where you can have several inches in a very short period of time, in the springtime especially, and it may be isolated, but when it happens, water has nowhere to go. And if you look at that area, and all that water funnels right down there into those Playa lakes, and those aren't small lakes.
No.
And I had a friend of mine. Well, he worked for me for several years as one of my equipment operators, and he helped put Sonsi in. And he said, "This is going to be underwater, y'all. It's 4 feet too low. You need to add 4 feet." He told the engineers. Nobody would listen to him. 2 days after he told me that, I'm coming north on Sonsi, probably about the time you're talking about in 19. The westbound lanes closed.
Yes.
And I could go, one lane was open. I was in about a foot of water. Of course, I didn't have any trouble in my truck.
Right.
But, and that was just a small little inch rain we had. But they put all that load out there off on the west side of Sonsi, all those roofs and all that concrete. It has nowhere to go. I mean, it can't soak it up.
Right.
So it's just poor judgment, I think. So I think what the voters are looking for is people that have good judgment. They want a council member that they can trust to make good decisions for them. And I don't know if we've had that lately.
Right. You know, and I'm not an engineer. I'm not a home builder. But I know what I know. And I know that building out in an area like that, and having lived here for as long as I have, and been back so many different times to see my kids, we do not have a solid drainage system in this town. So before we build any more, we need to figure out the best way to do it.
But do we really need one? We've been here for 100 years. If it rains, which is rare,
right,
we deal with it.
Yeah.
I mean,
but you got to deal with it smartly.
But you don't build new properties in a Playa Lake.
Right.
You be smart about it. Build on the hill.
Yes. So at least the water has somewhere to run off to, and not run in someone's house and cause thousands and thousands of dollars worth of property damage. And they most likely won't have flood insurance.
Yep. Well, I think a lot of people are upset about that because it's a separate bill. They don't even put it on your utility bill. They mail it separate, and the cost associated with sending that out, billing it separate, collecting it separate, inputting it separate. To me, if they would be honest and say, look, we we don't have enough money. We've spent more than we brought in. We're going to raise your trash bill $5. I don't think people would have had a problem with it. But when and it's all in the same system, and it's unregulated. You can raise trash whatever you want.
Right.
So I don't understand why they didn't do that. And they can't really seem to be able to answer it either.
Well, that's why I talk about transparency. And that's why I keep going back and people keep asking me, why are you so concerned about what time they do the city council meetings? Because when they're done at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon, and most people in Amarillo are at work at that time, how do they know what's really being done? I'm sorry, but that doesn't make any sense to me. And that's why we've got to change when the meetings are. We've got to allow the public to come back, especially as Governor Abbott is lifting COVID restrictions and ending all of that across the state. We've got to start doing some in-person town hall meetings and bring the public back so they know what's going on.
So do you think it's the government's place to tell business owners what to do?
No, I do not. I think people have common sense. I think people can use the mind that God gave them to make wise decisions. You know, I put on my Facebook page yesterday, and it was the article of what Governor Abbott did when he spoke in Lubbock, and I said, guess what? You can still wear a mask if you want to. You can still social distance if you want to. You can get the vaccine if you want to. But the best stimulus package for our society are open businesses. And if you put all the Fortune 500 companies against all of the thousands and thousands of small business owners in this country, small business owners are the backbone of our economics in this country. And one of the things I love about Amarillo, and I loved it from the minute I got here 12 years ago, was the loyalty that people in this town have to their small businesses. And we need them to stay open. They're the ones that do most of the paying of taxes and living and dying and working around here, not big companies. So I don't think the government has any right to tell them when they can and can't open. Let those people decide. And if that business says, hey, we'd like you to wear masks if you shop here, the consumer can choose to do that or go elsewhere. But from what I've seen, I think most people are willing to say, okay, I'll wear a mask if that's what you'd like me to do, as long as we can keep your business open. But I think the government overreached on the federal level, on the state, and on a city level. And I've never been a fan of wearing masks. And I do it out of respect for others. And I'm not going to, like I've told people 100 times, I would not disrespect a minimum wage employee at any company in any state or any town if they said, sir, could you please put on a mask? Sure, you bet. Because they're just doing their job.
Right.
But that's the business. That should be the business's discretion and their say-so, not the government.
Yeah, the last time I read the Constitution, it indicated to me that the sovereign citizen, we have sovereignty. The government only has the rights that we give it.
Correct. That are expressed
It's not
in
the
the
other way
Constitution.
around. We're not subjects. We're
Right.
citizens. And there's a big difference. And it seems like they're trying to change that. And it seems like when people get into a position of responsibility or power, I don't know what happens to them, but there's something that clicks in their brain, and all of a sudden they think they can be a tyrant and start dictating everybody what they should do. I just don't understand where it comes from.
Me either.
It's concerning, and it's getting worse. But I think the citizens as a whole, the voters, they understand what I'm talking about. They understand. They know more about the Constitution than our politicians.
Right. I wonder how many of our elected officials on every level of government have ever spent any serious time actually going through the Constitution.
Probably not very many, but we've given out thousands of them here in Amarillo because
Right.
we want people to read it and to have it and to take it with them.
You know, when I was in the Navy, I used to quiz my junior sailors at random. What does Article 1, Section A of the Constitution say? what does this say in the Constitution? What does the Bill of Rights say?
Mm-hmm.
And they would ask me, they're like, Chief, why are you so concerned about that? I'm like, because this is your country.
Mm-hmm.
Like George Washington said, when we assumed the role of soldier, we did not lay aside the citizen. I said, just because we wear the uniform and we have to follow certain orders of the president and of the Department of Defense, and there are certain liberties that we place to the side in service of our country, does not mean that we are not citizens. And you need to know what the Constitution says, so that way if you choose to get out at 4 years or 24 years, you know what your rights are.
Mm-hmm.
This is your country, and we have got to do a better job as leaders educating people on the Constitution and actually abiding by it. It's more than just lip service. We have to live it.
Well, maybe that's something, if you become a council member, you could propose that the schools get together and teach the Constitution, and maybe have an essay contest with students in high school about the Constitution and give them some sort of award for the best essays or something.
That's
we need to engage the students and engage the schools and engage the community and things like that, so they learn that, because I don't know that they're being taught properly.
Right.
And that comes down to the schools, but it's a concern of mine that our children aren't being taught our history.
Right. And I spent, even when the Democratic primary started in July, August 2019, I had all of my kids, from the 8-year-old at the time to our 15-year-old at the time, sit down and watch. We watched all the debates. People said, yeah, but you're a Republican. Why would you have them watch a Democratic debate? Like, because they need to know what these people on the other side are advocating for. They need to know what President Trump is advocating for. I had them watch every debate possible. Maybe not every one, but close to it. And we would discuss it, because I want my kids to be educated. Because I told them, whoever wins the 2020 election, their policies, their ideology will play a major part in laws that could affect you, your kids, and your grandchildren. I said, because what they do now, some of their policies won't go into effect for 10 or 15 years. And I looked at my youngest, he was 8 at the time, and I said, in 15 years, you'll be 23. You may have kids by then. And those laws are going to affect your children. And it kind of dawned on him. So we are a political family as far as open discussion.
That's good. That's very good. Well, is the other big issue that seems to be on people's minds that we hear in the news is the animal shelter. Do you have any thoughts or ideas on that?
Well, I'm actually set up to do a tour of the animal shelter this coming Friday on March 5th. Going to meet with the director to discuss needs that they have, discuss what their challenges are. So I'm just trying to educate myself. So between now and Election Day, I know what challenges they face. I know that right now they're close to, I talked to the city manager last week, Jared Miller, and we discussed what the definition of a no-kill shelter is. And they said you have to have over 90% or more of animals that are not euthanized. Now, some animals have to be euthanized. Animals that are very old, dangerous, injured, beyond restoring them, you have to, because you can't let an animal suffer. And I want to say right now we're in the 80% of keeping dogs alive. But when it comes to cats, because of the amount of stray cats in this town, it's around 50%. So it's not a no-kill shelter. But I do want to meet with them, and I am going to meet with them this week to go over those issues and find out what challenges we face and what possible solutions we can come up with to take care of any problems.
I'm wondering if the city could work with some of these nonprofit organizations and just let them run it.
Right.
And maybe that they could save money and they could make money and make it all work better than just having just the city run it.
Well, I mean, that is certainly something that we could look into on not just with the animal shelter, but in multiple facets in our city is privatization.
Mm-hmm.
Years ago, like I said, I joined the Navy in 1999.
Mm-hmm.
Around that time, the Navy was still building most of their ships at their own shipyards. Well, that cost a tremendous amount of money and manpower, so they privatized a lot of those big contracts out. And when they privatized it out, it ended up saving the DOD, the Department of Defense, quite a bit of money because now we didn't have to have X amount of thousands of sailors who can't deploy if we have some kind of national emergency working at a shipyard. So when you have contractors do it, that opens up more trained sailors to go back to the fleet.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing here. If we privatize some of these functions of the city, we might be able to do it better. They might be able to do it better. They might be able to do it at a more cost-efficient rate than what the city can. And some of them have more resources, because they're not run off taxpayer dollars.
Yep.
And I'm definitely in support of looking into that.
Yeah, I offered a year or so back. They had these brush sites around town. Well, they called me about grinding for them, and I kind of gave them a proposal. Make a long story short, they ended up shutting them down. One of them burnt, and but anyway, I said, well, so they shut them all down. We had no brush sites, and they were wanting everybody to go out to the dump. Well, it's way out there, northwest of town, but I have a lot of rental property and we trim a lot of trees, and I was going to put a crew on just trimming trees, and I went out there to see where I needed to send my crews, because I hadn't been out to the dump since they threw me out 20 years ago. But not everybody can say they were thrown out of the dump. But it's a long story.
Isn't that what they did to President Trump?
Probably.
DC is kind of a dump.
Yeah, that's basically what happened. Anyway, I followed this guy in. He had this load of limbs, and I talked to the guy running the equipment there because he had a scraper, and I was looking at buying a scraper at the time, and we talked about cat equipment. But I'm watching them grind this stuff, and they don't know what they're doing. They had this guy running around under there, jumping up there, throwing stuff in this grinder, and he ducks just about the time a chunk of wood comes flying out the top. He doesn't even know that he just about got his head taken off. I'm like, they're going to kill somebody out here. So I'll talk to the kid that had brought the brush in. I said, how do you like coming out here? And he said, oh, it's okay. And, but it occurred to me, I have a perfect spot. I said, what if I had a place off I-27 in McCormick to take your brush? And he took off running. So I thought he misunderstood me, so I start to drive off. Well, he's banging on my window, and I roll it down, and he wanted the address. I said, oh no, I don't have anything. I was just wondering. And he said, well, if you get it, call me. And he gave me his card. I gave him my card. And before I got back to the office, he calls me. He says, Dan, do you know what they charged me to dump that load of brush? I said, $35. It was $140.
And how many years ago was this?
This is a 16-foot flatbed. Of course, green limbs are pretty heavy. This is probably 2 or 3 years ago.
Okay.
When all that happened. Well, I thought, I've got all the equipment. I got the tub grinder. I've got excavator with a thumb and the location right there. So I just opened up a brush site. Well, they banned the contractors from going to the dump. Well, they had nowhere to go. So I really did it for them because I felt sorry for them. I didn't even charge anybody because I needed a place to dump. I said, bring it over here. I'll chip them up and we'll do something with the chips, you know. But it kind of took off. So we kind of figured out what our cost was, and we took an old motorhome and set it up there. And I keep people there 6 days a week from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day. And, you know, we have a lot of business there. And I've told the city, well, then they went back and opened them up, but they wouldn't let the contractors in. Then they fence them. They spend all this money. Then they got to man them. I said, and I told them, y'all have to man these sites because of the bad things that are going to happen in these places. I told them, you're lucky. You have one that if it catches on fire, you're not going to have a problem. 2 days later, it burnt. Kind of coincidence, huh?
Right.
I said, the rest of them y'all got by transmission lines. That's not very bright. But anyway, it's kind of an interesting deal. But I told the city, I said, look, I'll tell you what I'll do. You figure out what it's costing you to run those sites. I know what it costs. I know what the equipment costs. I know it because they're very inefficient the way they do it. I said, divide it in two, and I'll handle it for you. Done. I mean, it would have saved, I know they'd be saving a couple of $1 million a year. I mean, just in employees and maintenance, equipment cost. I know they're leasing the property. I don't know what that's costing them. I mean, it gets expensive fast.
Very fast.
And maintaining a tub grinder is not cheap.
No.
And then they've got they're loading it with loaders, the mechanics, I mean, the parts, the labor to man them, the benefits. I mean, it just doesn't even make any sense why they're doing that. But 5 people probably wanted them back, so they opened them up, but then they won't let contractors go. Well, who's paying the contractors? The citizens. So it doesn't make sense to me that they wouldn't let them
right
in there. Of course, we have to, you know, but we have ours fenced. I have a fire hydrants on every corner. They don't. I mean, we have a pretty good setup. But I mean, that's an example of privatizing. Yes. I'm not trying to advertise my brush site because they can go to the city for free. Right. Contractors have to come to me or pay through the nose going out to the dump.
But it's a good example of what a private citizen, such as yourself, had an entrepreneurial idea and was able to take a place that you owned and turn it into a profitable business that saves money for the city.
Yeah. Yeah.
To me, it's a win-win all the way around.
Yeah, and then we had Randall County come to me because they were all dumping the brush in the road ditches, right? Or they'd find an abandoned house and dump it in that person's carport. We had that happen a lot. People were dumping brush all kinds of places. I mean, they couldn't get rid of it.
No, I've seen people come down my alley, and I live in the Puckett neighborhood right behind Westgate Mall. I've seen people trying to come down my alley trying to dump brush and different things. And the few times I've been out there, I'm like, hey, what are you doing? And then they just take off, and they probably go find another alley. But there's got to be a place where someone can take that, where they don't get charged an arm and a leg, and where it's not clogging up the dumpster bins, it's not clogging up alleyways, or just being dumped on the side of the road.
And it's not clogging up the landfill. I mean, Why would you want to take brush out to the landfill? I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me. When we totally recycle it and give it away.
Yeah.
So it's just things like that. We need some people in there with some good judgment to make some logical decisions to save the taxpayers money. So what do? Start charging for parking downtown. What's your opinion on that?
I don't think we should have to pay for parking downtown. There is more downtown now than there was 10 years ago, and I think that's great. Saw Poodle Stadium is beautiful. Like I said earlier, I drove up here every other weekend for 3 years to see my kids. When I came up here from El Paso, I had to have a place to stay. I didn't want to stay with my ex-wife, so I stayed at the Embassy Suites downtown because it was a nice, modern, safe hotel, and I didn't have to pay for parking down there. I still don't think that right now there's any reason anybody should be paying for parking anywhere in downtown for anything. Downtown Amarillo is not Dallas. It's not Fort Worth. It's not San Diego or, Houston. It's Amarillo. There's ample parking all over the city. Why should anyone have to pay? It's not like the few people that go down there parking is going to interfere with anything going on with city business. And I think, to me, that's a perk of being able to go downtown, is not having to pay for parking. I think if you start charging for that, you de-incentivize people from wanting to go down there. I mean, we've got a whole block of shops in downtown that are shop buildings that are empty. So how about we start filling up those businesses first before we ever get to the idea of charging people to park downtown? Mm-hmm. Let's do one thing before the other.
Yeah, now they've got a full-time person running around giving people tickets. What's that cost?
Right.
And I would think that's going to cost more than they're bringing in on the parking. Then they've got this fancy app. Well, what if there's a lot of people that don't have smartphones?
Right.
Now, there's not as many as there used to be, but still, the fact is, if you have one, I mean, to me, it doesn't make sense. Well, one thing I loved about Amarillo, when I came up here from Austin in 94, and I had to go downtown to meet an attorney, and I was like in shock because I could actually drive up, park, no parking meters, and go in and come back out and leave without any hassle. In Travis County, I would come out. I mean, first of all, you'd have to park a mile away and walk forever to get there. And if you did find a place to park and you go over 3 minutes, they're going to have in my case, they'd have a boot on my truck because I probably have the state or the record in Travis County for parking tickets and speeding tickets. I think I hold the state record. But it was just irritating. I mean, it's miserable living in a place like that.
Right.
So it was just like freedom. It was really, and it's little things like that I think make Amarillo great.
I agree.
But they all want to me, it's like, oh, well, they do this in Houston, so we're going to do it here. Or they do it in Austin, so we're going to do it here. Or they do it in Dallas, so they want to do it here.
But we don't need to. We're not Houston.
Exactly.
We're not Dallas. We're not Fort Worth. We're not San Antonio. We're Amarillo. Mm-hmm. We are a smaller town. We're a great city. We're the largest city in this region, not just of the state, but in the country. Mm-hmm. We're 4 hours, 4.5 hours from Oklahoma City, roughly the same to Albuquerque, 6 hours to Denver. We are the biggest city in this region of the country. We got people coming in from all over the state, all over the panhandle, and from our neighboring states coming in to shop, spend their money. Let's make it attractive for not just these people to come and spend their weekend dollars, but want to come and relocate here and embrace what's great about Amarillo. And you de-incentivize that by doing things like paying for parking downtown. To me, that's another issue with transparency. Mm-hmm. I didn't know they were going to start charging for parking. How many of the voters in this city knew that? Probably not a lot, because a lot of people don't go downtown all the time.
Well, to me, it's not fair to the businesses elsewhere in the city that people don't have to pay for parking. And I talked to some business right after, because I got a parking ticket. I had to meet somebody downtown for lunch, and they wanted to meet downtown, so I met them. I come out, well, I got a ticket. Have I paid it? No, because I'm not going to pay it. They can put me in jail, but I'm not paying the ticket. I don't think it's fair to penalize that business downtown, which is really what they're doing, because I won't go back because I'm not going to pay to park.
Well, there's a lot of people that won't go. Mm-hmm. They'll be like, man, I don't want to go and have to spend $5, $3, whatever. I mean, I'm sure the parking fee is not excessive.
It's not
but it's the fact
price.
that it's the principle of the matter.
Exactly.
You can go to a lot of places around town and go to a lot of nice pubs and restaurants and entertainment venues that are not downtown where you could park for hours. Where if someone needed to, had a few too many, could park overnight and get an Uber or a taxi home. But you park downtown, if they're going to charge you, that overnight, if you had to park overnight, becomes a hefty fee.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they charge at night. I don't think they do, but I could be wrong on that. But
Yeah.
still, during the day, that's when people are doing business. You're going to go to a bank downtown and they're going to charge you? That just doesn't make sense to me.
No, that's what takes people and motivates them to take their business elsewhere.
Well, and they want to overcomplicate things. That's the nature of government. They always have to overcomplicate. Keep it simple.
Yes.
Be honest. Get the job done. That's all the people want. They're there to serve the voter, not the other way around. But they flip it. And pretty soon they're controlling you, telling you what to do. And it's about making money for the city. The city's there not to make money, but to provide the basic services for the city.
Right.
That's what I think the voters want.
No, they do. They want it simple. They want common sense. And for the most part, they want to keep as much of their hard-earned dollars in their pocket as possible.
Well, the voters resoundingly defeated the convention center.
Right.
What do you think about that?
Well, our Civic Center, I think, was built in, 1968?
Something like that.
It should be renovated. Should be renovated. Should be renewed. So we have better venues coming in, not just sports venues, not just concerts, but trade shows, rodeos, gun shows, things of that nature. More conventions. I mean, I think if we had a better convention center, it would be great if we could get the Republican state party to do one of their conventions here in Amarillo. And I think with an updated convention center, civic center, if it was updated and more organizations were hosting venues and events out of there, it would sow seeds that Amarillo is up and coming and might spur other companies to move here and raise our reputation. But I think that it needs to be done wisely and not at the expense of the taxpayer. You know, when I lived in San Diego, there's a huge issue of the San Diego Chargers moving to LA because the owner wanted the city of San Diego to pay for a new stadium. City of San Diego said, we're not putting that burden on the taxpayers. So they put it back on the ownership. I think that if we want a new civic center, we should get investors to come in because they're going to do it better than the city. We should have, like I said, we should have investors come in and do it. And I know there were two plans, and one of the plans called for, I believe it was a 39% property tax increase or a 39% increase, and the other one was 16%. Both of them require taxpayers to put in some money. But I think that if you do that, it should be at the taxpayer's discretion, not just a wholesale, we're going to do this. And it should be done as fiscally responsible as possible. I believe Lubbock built their civic center that has 10,000 seats for a fraction of what either one of the plans for our civic center would cost. So why don't we go to that group that built their civic center and try to broker a deal with them at a third of the cost? Because that seems like that'd be a smarter way to do it.
Well, I think people want, they try to make things too fancy. People don't want fancy. People want practical. You know, it doesn't have to be super, super fancy, you know. And I don't think it would cost that much to build a facility that people could use. And we've got a lot of land, you know, we've got all that. Now, I guess it's the county that owns the fairgrounds. And they've got the property across the street from the convention center. But I mean, I don't know why they don't think of things in more practical terms. They see some fancy convention center in Las Vegas and think that'll fit in Amarillo, which it won't.
Right.
We don't. I just don't think the people here need some super extravagant casino type facility. They want to be able to have the rodeo. And I think you could call one of the contractors around here and they could put up a building that would house a rodeo and a farm show and a lot of other events that wouldn't cost that much money and probably last forever and be expandable.
Right.
That could be used for all kinds of different things. But, they wanted, and when they build something like what they're proposing, then it limits you because it's really not expandable. So then they want to tear down their city building, move it, so they all get a new building, and guess who's paying for it?
Taxpayers.
But I don't see how a new convention center helps somebody that owns a single-family house over in South Lawn or San Jacinto who's working, trying to make ends meet, paying his bills. And if he does go to the convention center, they're going to charge him to get in.
Right.
It doesn't make sense to me. But bring the revenue bond boys in that know what they're doing. Use revenue bonds, private investors. And if it's not viable, don't do it.
Yeah. And I think that it should start first with private investors. When Jerry Jones wanted to build that terrible stadium down there in Arlington, and I love the Cowboys, but I hate that stadium. It's big, it's gaudy. Some people may disagree with me. That's fine. But they didn't use taxpayer dollars down there. Jerry Jones had his investors, and they built $1 billion stadium, which, like you said, people don't want fancy, they want practical. Stadium is not practical. It's fancy, but it's not practical. Well, we need to start with private investors first. And before we ever consider raising taxes or putting a bond issue out there asking taxpayers to contribute, we need to look at private investors first. Because like you said, not every citizen's going to use it.
Right. And
I think we should renovate what we currently have? I do. I'm fully on board with renovating and making it more modern. Like I said, doesn't have to be fancy, but I think it should be more appealing so we get better venues there. We raise our city reputation. We can do a lot more than what's been done since 1968. But it needs to start with private investors first.
Yeah, and work with all the organizations in the community to see what they can get the organization's input in it. The people that may use it. Even our Republican Party. I've rented rooms at the convention center when I've had people like Ted Cruz here and things like that. And which we don't have, you pay for the use of it. But I think they could get input on the community to see because I think it could be some smaller rooms that could rent for a lot less because not everybody needs 1,500 people at an event, so there's a lot of things I think they could do to get input from the actual people that are going to use. Anybody that's ever leased it, they need to get their input.
Right.
They've got the list. Call them up and see what they think they really need. But I think they would get more use, maybe bring in more revenue if you cater to some of the smaller organizations that maybe they could have a shared conference room and facilities where from the Kiwanis to the Lions to some of the other local groups could go in there and use smaller venues at a very inexpensive price. But then that begets more interest in it, more use, that sort of thing.
Right.
It's marketing.
Yes. That's something that Amarillo needs to get better about is marketing.
You don't have to have the big fancy events coming in and that's it. Cater to all the events in the community the best that you can. And then have another facility. If you have a big event that you could open up and use, it could even be possibly open air. You wouldn't necessarily have to have a fancy concert hall. You know, they've got one across the street that sits empty most of the time. So, I don't know. If people go to concerts, I don't necessarily think they need a real fancy auditorium. A lot of them have them in pastures. Ask Willie Nelson. He did pretty good just on a flatbed truck and, 160 acres. Works pretty good.
Well, we could do concerts at the Sod Poodle Stadium
Sure.
during when it's not baseball season or when they're away.
Yep. So where do you see Amarillo in 10 years?
Well, I think Amarillo is going to continue to grow. I see houses going up everywhere, continue to see new businesses, small businesses start up. I know Amazon's coming. I've heard that there's a dairy company that wants to build an $80 million facility here. I think that's great. And I read something here recently. I believe Governor Abbott said that Amarillo is one of the fastest growing areas in Texas economically. I think that's fantastic. And I think that we need to keep pressing to the future, but also at the same time, preserve our Western heritage out here. That's why I would like to see more rodeos out here. It's one of the things I looked most forward to about moving here 12 years ago was rodeos. I heard the old song Amarillo by Morning by George Strait, and up from San Antonio, he's coming up here to ride in a rodeo, and I don't hardly see any of them out here. So as much as I want to see Amarillo move towards broadening our diversity, broadening our economics, bringing in manufacturing, bringing in other companies, incentivizing our small business owners, I would still like to see us maintain our Western heritage and our small town feel. Because growing up in Fort Worth, in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, we had a small town feel. Now when I go back to Fort Worth, all those farms and ranches that I used to play on as a kid and cross people's ranches, they probably didn't want me to, but I did because there was a gas station on the other freeway on the other side of town. All of those are gone. And it breaks my heart, because that was home. Now Amarillo's home. And I love the people here. I love the small town feel. Like I said earlier, I love the loyalty people have to their small businesses. So we need to keep that. We need to keep that small town feel, but while keeping an eye on moving towards the future and moving towards progress. But we can't abandon one and have the other. I think we can do both.
Well, we have the Western heritage. We have the big ranches. We have the Paladuro Canyon that the city of Amarillo doesn't think exists. I mean,
then we need to promote that.
Do you ever hear about it? No. There's people in Amarillo I don't think even know that it's there. And to me, they should push that. And the railroad history here, this is huge. That's why Amarillo's here, is because of the railroads. We're a big railroad, huge railroad town. So I think they need to promote what we have and quit trying to bring stuff in that, we're not known for baseball. And I think that's what would bring people into Amarillo. Be who you are. Not try to be something that you're not.
Yeah, I have nothing wrong with the Sod Poodles. I think that's great.
I don't either.
I'm not a baseball fan, so
yeah, I'm not either.
I like football and basketball. Baseball's never been my cup of tea, but my brother, when he comes up here if he comes up here in the spring or summer, I'll take him to a Sod Poodles game because he loves baseball. Baseball's his passion. But you're right, we have Paladuro Canyon. Hopefully we can get the Texas play to come back. I know they stopped because of COVID. Hopefully that comes back. These are the kind of things that we should also be promoting. Mm-hmm. And that's why I said we need to look at the future and move forward, but also hold on to the past and keep our roots where they are. And when I go back to Fort Worth to visit family and people there say, oh, we're in North Texas, I'm like, no, you're not. Y'all are in Central Texas. No, Central Texas is Waco. And I'm like, no, y'all come up to Amarillo and I'll show you around the Panhandle. I'll take you out to Cadillac Ranch. I'll take you out to the Big Texan. I know that's a touristy area, but I'll take them out there and show it to them. I'll take you out to Groom to see the crosses. I'll take you to Paladuro Canyon. And my wife and I, we love Paladuro Canyon. We love going to Wildcat Bluff right over off the loop on the northwest side of town because it's beautiful hiking out there. That's what real Texas is about. Not Houston, not Dallas, not Austin.
Not concrete.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, when I first came up here, the guy that I bought my group of houses from, because I came up here to represent a client on a 1031 exchange, and ended up buying 11 houses to save the transaction. But I remember it was Jim Fletcher, and he said, "Rogers, you're not going back to Austin. You're going to stay here." I said, no, Austin's the center of the universe, you know. He said, nope, I can tell. Well, in a couple of months, within a year, I had moved to Amarillo. He was right. So, if you stay up here very long, you don't want to leave.
No.
So it's like I had a teacher when I was in middle school, and he used to always say, "It's not the place, it's the people."
It's the people.
And that's what makes Amarillo great.
I agree.
Well, do you have a website that people can see who you're about and learn more about you?
The website is votetillery.com. Tillery is spelled Tillery. I have a Facebook page. You can search for Jason Tillery, Amarillo City Council, Place 1. I also have an email address in case anyone wants to ask any questions. It's just the letter J, Tillery, AMA, citycouncil@gmail.com. My personal cell phone number is on the website. Somebody wants to text me, text first before you call, because I got a lot of calls coming in. People just call me. I may not answer it right away, but if anyone has any questions, they can private message me, they can text me, they can email me, and I'll answer it as honestly as I possibly can. Now, I may not be the smartest man in the room, in any room, but 20 years in the military taught me that I know I have the leadership experience. I know how to work with a group of people who may not always see eye to eye on everything, but I know how to work within that kind of a system to get common sense results. And that's why I'm running.
Well, very good. Well, we appreciate you coming,
Dan, I appreciate
Jason.
it. Thank you.
All right. Well, good luck.
Thank you very much.
All right. We'll talk to you soon.
All right.